On April 16, 2026, QVC filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in Texas. That same day, the hosts went live. Products moved, phones rang, the broadcast looked exactly like it had for 40 years. That was the problem. The $14 billion habit that built QVC had been breaking quietly for a decade. The filing did not destroy anything. It confirmed what the empty screen had already been saying. This is the gamble that broke QVC. At its peak, QVC generated more than $14 billion in annual revenue. 12.7 million customers returned to the same screen, bought from the same hosts, and followed the same daily routine. 96% of the company's sales came from repeat and reactivated buyers. That number is not a retail metric, it is the measurement of a daily habit. Familiar women in familiar living rooms, listening to familiar voices coming through a television set every morning and every evening. For decades, that habit held. By the end of this, the habit will make sense. The warmth of it, the stickiness of it, the reason people kept the screen on for hours even when there was no intention of buying anything, and the one gamble that committed the entire company to a future that could not survive the moment that habit broke. The debt, the merger, the slow disappearance of an audience that was never going to be replaced. All of it traces back to the same screen. All of it started with one broadcast. Westchester, Pennsylvania, November 24, 1986. Joseph Siegel launched QVC into 7.6 million American homes through 58 cable systems across 20 states. The first product sold on air was a Windsor shower companion, priced at $11.49. Early accounts of that first broadcast say the channel took in roughly $7,400 in orders by the end of the night. The beginning was small, specific, and completely live. Siegel built QVC as a softer alternative to the home shopping network, which had started on Florida radio back in 1977 when a man named Lowell Paxson needed to move 112 can openers. HSN proved that live selling could work on television. QVC turned it into something people wanted to sit with. The difference was in the tone. HSN pushed products. QVC introduced them. The hosts talked to the camera the way a neighbor talks about something they found at the store this morning. The earliest roster included Kathy Levine and Bob Bowersox. Later came Lisa Robertson, who stayed for 20 years and left in December 2014. David Venable joined in 1993 and never left. Jill Bauer hosted for 25 years and aired her final show in June 2019. These were not rotating salespeople cycling through quarterly contracts. They were familiar faces who showed up in the same living room at the same hour for decades. That familiarity seemed like a feature. It was the entire business. By the early 2000s, QVC reached more than 100 million American television households. The audience was overwhelmingly women over 50. They tuned in at the same time each day. They knew the hosts by name. Some called in regularly enough that the hosts recognized their voices on air. The format had been built around live interaction from the start, and the callers made the screen feel reciprocal. A viewer was not watching a commercial. A viewer was participating in a conversation that happened to sell jewelry and kitchen appliances and holiday decorations. But here is the detail that everyone missed at the time. The product was never the product. The product was the presence. The screen filled a room with a voice. The host remembered what a caller bought last week. The routine of turning on QVC at the same hour every day created a structure that resembled companionship more than commerce. $14 billion in annual revenue was not generated by great deals on non-stick cookware. It was generated by the fact that millions of women turned on the television every day and felt slightly less alone. That was the business. Everything else was just the delivery mechanism. 2015. The American cable television industry still had roughly 95 million pay television subscribers. QVC reached more than 100 million households. The numbers looked stable. They were not. By late 2025, the national pay television subscriber base had fallen to somewhere between 65 million and 70 million. The QVC audience was 73% women over 50, the demographic most dependent on traditional cable television. Every quarter, the pool of people who could find QVC by flipping through channels got smaller. Cable subscriber losses were not a secret. They were a trend that had been accelerating for a decade straight. What comes next is the part that still does not make sense. Rather than pivot away from a shrinking screen, QVC doubled down on it. In 2017, Liberty Interactive acquired the remaining 62% of HSN in an all-stock transaction valued at roughly $1.9 billion. The two networks were rolled into a single corporate structure that would eventually rebrand as Create Retail. John Malone controlled the voting architecture through Liberty's tracking stock structure. He did not need to own QVC outright. He controlled the parent, and the parent controlled the asset. Greg Maffei, the chief executive of Liberty, publicly praised the deal. The clock was already ticking. The company just could not hear it yet. Before the merger, QVC carried roughly $5.3 billion in debt on $8.7 billion in revenue. After the merger was fully reflected in 2018, total debt rose to roughly $7.4 billion on $14 billion in combined revenue. The combined revenue looked larger on paper, but both businesses depended on a cable ecosystem that was losing subscribers by the millions every year. The gamble was now explicit. The company had committed its entire capital structure to the survival of a screen that its own audience was slowly walking away from. If this kind of story is useful, subscribe. This channel covers one corporate collapse every week. By December 2025, the domestic customer count had dropped from 12.7 million to 6.6 million. Television minutes viewed fell quarter after quarter. HSN's longtime headquarters in St. Petersburg, Florida was shuttered. Operations were consolidated in Westchester, Pennsylvania. The company was shrinking while the debt stayed the same size. Revenue in 2025 came in at $8.3 billion, with a net loss exceeding $2.1 billion. The stock, which had traded above $900 a decade earlier, fell below $3, and the timing of what came next was almost too perfect. QVC launched on TikTok Shop in August 2024. By April 2026, 74,000 TikTok creators had featured QVC items in shoppable videos and live streams. The company acquired nearly 1 million new American customers through TikTok Shop in 2025 alone. The chief executive officer called it the win growth strategy. QVC was no longer defending the old screen. It was trying to rent attention inside somebody else's feed. TikTok Shop launched in the United States in September 2023, with more than 150 million American users already on the platform. Amazon Live had been running since 2019. Whatnot reported $8 billion in live gross merchandise volume in 2025 alone. TikTok replaced entertainment. Amazon replaced convenience. Whatnot replaced collector energy. The transaction migrated. Attention fragmented across platforms, algorithms, and feeds that refreshed every few seconds. The companionship was never replaced. A TikTok feed at midnight has no host who remembers a caller's name. An Amazon live stream will never recognize a returning voice. These platforms absorb the transaction, the entertainment, the impulse purchase. The one thing they left behind was the feeling of a familiar presence showing up in the same living room at the same time every day for 25 years. The emotional job that generated $14 billion was never the selling. It was the presence. Presence is the one thing that cannot survive a platform migration. It cannot be transferred into an algorithm or distributed across 74,000 creators who each have their own audience, their own schedule, their own feed. The thing QVC built was specific, human, and slow. The thing that replaced it is fast, fragmented, and anonymous. The debt mattered, and so did the merger and the shrinking cable market. All of them were conditions. None of them were the cause. The cause was simpler than any balance sheet could capture. The daily ritual of turning on a screen and feeling less alone was the business. When that feeling stopped being delivered, the customers did not switch to another shopping channel. They just turned it off, and the revenue followed them out of the room. The filing confirmed all of it. Debt will be restructured from $6.6 billion down to $1.3 billion. The company said it would emerge within 90 days. Operations would continue as normal. The host would keep selling. The broadcast would not stop. The screen is still on. The hosts are still there. The products are still moving. The company assured everyone that nothing would change, and the company was right. Nothing changed. The thing that mattered had already changed years earlier, quietly, in living rooms where the television was still tuned to the right channel, but nobody was sitting in front of it anymore. Ritual businesses do not collapse the way product companies do. They fail when the audience stops showing up, and they fail quietly because the infrastructure outlasts the habit. The screen stays on, the hosts keep hosting, the phones stop ringing, and nobody notices until the paperwork arrives. On April 16, 2026, the hosts went live. The broadcast looked exactly like it had for 40 years. That was the problem. And that was the gamble that broke QVC.